Hey everybody, welcome back to American History with Mr. Finn. Today we are continuing with our westward expansion, and one of the major things that's going to help with westward expansion and opening up the West for American citizens to move west is going to be what we already started with, which is the Industrial Revolution. Now if you remember, we talked a little bit about the Industrial Revolution as far as how it started in the late 1700s. And it started in the late 1700s, not with, big factories and machines and things like that. Well, I guess they were machines, but not metal working and steam power. They worked on water power, which was in the textile mills. So in textiles, if you remember, we talked about making cloth and things like that. That is where it begins. But by the time we're getting to the 1820s, which is going to be about 25, 30 years after textiles begin, we're going to start to see some of the real benefits of what we would consider industry happening for the Americans living at the time, and it makes a big difference too. So let's get out of textiles, and let's talk about the 1820s version of the Industrial Revolution. So as we keep going, we're going to see more and more of inventions, really. Industrial Revolution is going to be about inventions. One of those inventions, as we saw, was the cotton gin. Now some inventions, this is important just for in general, some inventions help, some inventions hurt. There's negative effects from it. So as we said with the cotton gin, you could produce a lot more cotton and do it very quickly. However, the negative effect is because you could do that, you needed to increase the amount of slaves that you had to bring that cotton in to where you had the cotton gin to clean it. So one of the negative aspects is now we're seeing an increase in the need of slavery in the South. And it's going to start this division between the non-slavery North and the slavery-dependent, as they feel, South. So that's just one example. But let's look at some of these ones that open us up to the West in the 1820s. Some of the things we see. We're going to see this. Steamships. Steamships are important. Until the Industrial Revolution, people had to just go on their boats that they would make the way that the river was flowing. It was hard to cut, and sometimes it was impossible to come back up the river. In fact, down the Mississippi River, people would take their crops and what they had made or produced and were going to sell at a market. They would make a ship, they would get on the Mississippi River, they would go, let me draw a picture of it. Let's pretend this is the Mississippi River and it's flowing this way. This person is happy because they're going to make some money. But they make their ship and they flow down the Mississippi River, and here is the market. This is where they make their money. And then they got to walk or travel back up by land to their house or where they started. So that's how it worked. With steamships, you could go up and down the river. You could go this way, and then you could go this way. You go right back up. So the idea is it's not going to take you weeks to get home. You take a ship down, you sell your products, you take a ship home, and you're there in a day or two. It goes so much faster. And that's really what these inventions in the Industrial Revolution is going to do, is just make things much faster and open up the country for all these people. So that's one thing. That's steamships. The next thing is going to be something called canals. Canals, like the Erie Canal that you might hear about in this class as we move forward, are going to be another thing that opens up the Midwest part of our country to markets on the East Coast and in other places. Canals are basically this. Let me draw a picture for canals. We have a person standing here in the middle of the country, and here is New York City, for example. But this is all land, and there's no water route to get there like the Mississippi River. How can we get there? Well, we have a lake, let's say, right here. And then you have a river that's going down here by New York City. What you're going to do with a canal is basically connect this lake to that river by digging, and water then can flow down this canal until it meets up with that river. And once it meets up with that river, you can take it down to New York, and all of a sudden you're not landlocked anymore. You have a way to get to New York with your products. And so canals will be another thing that opens up the West for the people trying to get to the east and, again, down the Mississippi River to the south. Next thing. Communication. We are going to see a massive increase in publications and in things that we call newspapers. We are also going to start to see the creation of something called a telegraph. So all of this is going to start to happen with the Industrial Revolution. So newspapers and publications for reading material and news. Before, if you lived, say, in Chicago, which is in the middle of the Midwest, you might not get information or news from your family or what's going on in the world because you're stuck in basically a landlocked area. Now with the movement of people, canals, and steamships, and things like that, you can get information a lot quicker. So newspapers start to pop up everywhere. More Americans are hearing about world events, more people are feeling connected. It's not as isolated in different places. So you're seeing our country kind of open up, the whole eastern half of our country. Telegraph lines. Telegraph, think of these as tweets. The original Twitter, you could send short messages over a telegraph line. Now that would not be a message like me talking to you. It was not a telephone. A telegraph line would be, electrical currents that you could basically chop up, and then that would signify different numbers and letters and things like that. So what would it sound like? I would be on one end with something listening to it, and I would hear this electrical current coming in going, and all of those little dashes and stops meant I could be like, oh, that's a B. That's a C, that's a this, that's a that. And I could write a little message out. Now here's the crazy thing. It might sound tedious, meaning it might sound like a lot of work, but this is instant. You are getting this immediately. For the people living back then, the idea of getting a message directly from someone 100 miles away instantly was mind-blowing to these people because that just didn't happen. Until then, you had to wait for the mail system, you had to wait for letters from people that were bringing it to you on a horseback. It would take a lot of time. Now with telegraph lines, you could get these messages to people instantly. And this was, again, mind-blowing for the people living at the time. So by the time we're getting to the 1820s, we're starting to see the Industrial Revolution make a difference in the people's lives living during the time. Now, does this mean that it was like modern times today? No. But this is a crazy difference for the people at the time, and it is changing society. And most of this is going to be happening in the North. The North is really going to love the Industrial Revolution. They're just going to embrace it. They're like, I love this new stuff, this new technology, these new ways of doing things is really helping us out. We love it. The South kind of stays being the South, kind of stays doing the exact same thing. So when I say we're changing society, really most of it, the change, is in the North. Change in the North. The South is kind of staying the same. And so as we come over the next few classes, we're going to continue to see this difference. The North is changing. It's getting faster. It's getting more populated. Everything there is up and coming. If you go to the South, people are still living on plantations. They're still farming. It's still agriculture. They are not loving this the same way the North is. So on that note, make sure you turn your notes into me today for participation and attendance purposes. You guys have been doing a great job. As we continue, we're going to start to look at this divide happening between North and South, and eventually we're going to see a breakdown in our country. So on that note, I will see you next class.